signal came whizzing my way. E was the earth that I found in my hair as I woke in the morning and crawled from my lair. F were the fleas and also the flies who feed on a fellow wherever he lies. From Another Attempt at an Anzac Alphabet. Nipper stood at the wicket, bat in hand, eyes on the ball. Sunlight poured like butter onto the stony ridge. Above him, seagulls swirled white against a blue-tinted sky. Far below, the tiny waves lapped against the golden sand of the cove. Mehmet One bowled the ball towards him. Nipper raised his bat. Thwack! The ball rose high, then down, soaring over their trench and down the cliffs, impossible to catch. "A sixer!" yelled Spud, waving the flies away from his face. "Run!" called Lanky from the opposite wicket. "Go, Nipper!" screamed Bluey. Wallaby Joe gave Nipper a thumbs up from the sidelines. Wallaby Joe wore the Anzac summer Gallipoli uniform. Boots, trousers cut off at the knees to make shorts, his identity disc and a sunburned nose under a smear of mud. Like most of the men, he'd stitched a bit of cloth under his forage cap to protect his neck from the sun, already fierce even in spring. He'd clipped his hair as short as possible, they all had, to try to get rid of the lice. Suddenly, an unknown hand threw the ball back up the cliff. The ball thudded on the rocky ground. Mehmet too ran forward and caught it. He grinned at Nipper. "Ben de Nevar, Johnny," he yelled triumphantly. He tossed the ball to Mehmet One. Mehmet One lined up to bowl again, his face as tanned and filthy as the Aussies', his grin as wide as theirs. Nipper held the bat steady, enjoying the spring warmth on his bare chest. Lanky had been out for 18 today, but Nipper had made 98 not out in the last cricket match at Wombat Flats. He'd shown them what he could do. Thwack! The ball soared over the fielders and landed behind a brushwood fence next to one of the Turkish trenches. "Nipper! Spud!" Curly's voice came urgently from the trench. "Captain Withy's coming up the gully! Skedaddle!" Nipper quickly threw the bat into the nearest bit of branch. It wasn't really a bat, but a bit of the packing crate that held the bully beef cans. Now it would just look like a bit of wood again. The wickets were sticks of packing crate too. Nipper gave them a quick kick with his boot. Now there was no sign that an illegal cricket match had ever been played here on the heights of Gallipoli. But what about the ball? It was still over on the Turkish side. Nipper was proud of that ball. He'd rolled mud and straw into the right shape and let it dry in the sun, then tied a bit of torn-off shirt he'd found in the trench and tied the whole lot up with string. Nipper shoved it into the pocket of his shorts, then glanced at Mehmet too apologetically, gesturing down as the captain strode up the gully. Mehmet too smiled. He looked as if he was in his late 20s, the same age as Lanky and Curly. Nipper wondered what his real name was. "Hoş kakal, Johnny," Mehmet too said, glancing down at the captain as if he understood exactly. Mehmet One had already vanished between the sandbags that led to the narrow sap and then to the enemy trenches. Nipper watched as Mehmet too dashed towards the Turkish trench about 60 yards from the Australians, past the line of flags with their red crescents set out for today's truce. Nipper hesitated in the muck-stained ground between the trenches. Fraternising with the enemy was a court-martial offence. It might even get him shot. The men had also been ordered not to leave the trenches during today's truce, which had been arranged so the men could bury the bodies from both sides, piled 4 deep in places, rotting, swelling and even exploding when anyone trod on them in the heat. Only the burial parties had leave to be outside in case emerging from the trenches gave the Allied position in numbers away to the enemy. It was a sensible order too. Many of the Turkish trenches had been invisible before the truce. It was only when lines of Turks emerged to sit on the edges that the Allied army had realised how many of the enemy they were facing. But there'd been no officers to see them today. When Nipper and Curly had come out of the trench to have a bit of batting practice, Mehmet 1 and 2 had cautiously emerged from their trench, then joined in when the Aussies grinned at them. It seemed that Turks liked cricket too, and Nipper's ball was still in their trench. Nipper didn't want to lose that ball. The trenches were too narrow for a game of cricket, but they sometimes had a bit of a kick around down on the beach when the firing was slack. Captain Withy was hidden for a moment behind a brushwood fence. Nipper raced over to the Turkish trench and gave a half salute to the startled faces looking up at him. Yet there was Mehmet 2 holding the ball. Mehmet 2 copied Nipper's half salute, then tossed the ball to him. Nipper caught it gratefully.